Every year, thousands of homeless people disappear without a trace. Some die anonymously, others are forgotten. But what really happens at night, when no one is looking? What if these disappearances were not the result of chance? A woman claims to know the truth. A truth so terrifying that it led her directly to a psychiatric hospital. The streets of a city, once night falls, become the scene of moving shadows and unfathomable secrets. The homeless, invisible to the world, seek refuge there in the hope of surviving until morning. But some of them never see the dawn. In 2006, in Phoenix, a woman named Judith showed up at the Arizona State Mental Hospital. She showed no signs of apparent madness, but her words were blood-curdling. "I know what happens to people who disappear." Authorities do not know how many homeless people disappear without a trace each year. Officially, about 46,000 die in indifference. Yet, according to Judith, this figure is far below the reality. She claims that some do not die, at least, not in the way we imagine. They are hunted, devoured. The dark streets, the silent alleys, the forgotten tunnels of the metropolis. These places are the hunting grounds of a force few know exists. A force that has always been there, in the shadows of humanity, choosing its victims with terrifying precision. Judith claims to be one of the only survivors to have discovered this secret. A secret that followed her all her life. Because, according to her, there are rules that these creatures follow scrupulously. They do not attack those who are surrounded, those who have a place in society. They choose those who will not be missed by anyone. But why did Judith wait so long before speaking out? Why go to a psychiatric hospital to reveal such a monstrous truth? Was she afraid that no one would believe her, or did she know that her days were numbered? What she told the doctors afterwards is beyond comprehension. A story that goes back almost a century. A story that explains why, every night, in every city, some homeless people never wake up. What if Judith was telling the truth? When she entered the Phoenix Psychiatric Hospital, Judith seemed neither disturbed nor confused. She walked with a confident step, her gaze calm but laden with an invisible weight. She walked to the front desk and uttered a single sentence, "I want to be committed." The nurses questioned her, trying to understand the reason for this sudden request. But Judith simply replied, "I'll tell you everything once I'm admitted." Intrigued, they placed her under observation for the night. The next morning, she was received by a therapist. The therapist recorded her every word, at first out of curiosity, then out of growing fear as she told her story. 46,000 homeless people die each year. But no one knows how many disappear. I do. Because I survived. Her eyes darkened as she spoke the words. She sounded tired, but determined to unburden her heart of a secret she had carried for too long. She recounted her birth in 1906, in Salem, Massachusetts, to a wealthy and privileged family. A peaceful childhood shattered by the stock market crash of 1929. Suddenly, her family lost everything. Her father, a once prosperous and beloved man, returned home on the evening of October 30th, his eyes blank, his steps heavy. He said not a word. He went upstairs and a few minutes later, a detonation shook the house. His father had just committed suicide. It was the beginning of an endless nightmare. Ruined, Judith, her mother and her brothers and sisters were driven from their home. Without family to take them in, they became homeless, wandering from town to town in search of survival. But that was only the beginning of the horror. As winter approached, her mother made a desperate decision to move south, where the climate was milder. After a long journey, they landed in a homeless shelter in Birmingham, Alabama. There, Judith discovered the true nature of the street world: hunger, fear, violence, and disappearances. At first, she thought people were simply leaving in search of a better place. But over time, she noticed that some left no trace. Their belongings remained untouched. No one spoke of them, as if they had never existed. Then came the night when everything changed. One evening in May 1930, her mother came home late from work. She looked more exhausted than ever. Judith volunteered to fetch water and food. But that night, something strange hung in the air. As she returned, she noticed that the city seemed too quiet. An inexplicable anxiety took hold of her. She hurried back to the building where they were sleeping, but as she climbed the stairs, a terrifying sound pierced the silence. Screams. Heartbreaking, inhuman screams. She ran, her heart pounding. When she reached their room, everything was in darkness. She lit a candle, and in the flickering light, she saw something. A silhouette. A massive, shapeless thing with glowing eyes. Then everything went black. When she woke up, her family was gone. Only the dried blood on the walls bore witness to their presence. Judith never found their bodies. And that was the first time she had a dream in which she herself was hunting in the night. It was only the beginning of her nightmare. The old manor stood proudly in the pale moonlight, its time-worn stones seeming to whisper the secrets of a forgotten past. Judith had taken refuge there after her return to America, drawn by something indescribable. She knew now what she was. She knew where she came from. But she still didn't know why this had happened to her. It was here, in this abandoned house, that she had begun to look for answers. The ancient books she had found there spoke of a cursed bloodline, of impure blood that carried within it an inescapable destiny. A legacy of death and shadow. The more she advanced in her research, the more the pieces of the puzzle came together. And when, in a forgotten corner of the library, she discovered a journal covered in dust, she understood. The yellowed pages told the story of a woman named Margaret Whitmore. A woman who, according to records, had lived in the 18th century, and who had disappeared without a trace. Judith felt a shiver run down her spine. The last passage in the journal was unsettling. Blood never lies. It claims what is its own. What we are, we did not choose it. But once it reaches us, we cannot run away. Judith looked up, her heart pounding. Margaret Whitmore. The name was familiar. She knew it. She had heard it before. Then a noise echoed through the deserted manor. A sinister crack, coming from the depths of the dwelling. Judith turned abruptly. Someone, or something was here. And she understood in an instant that the blood heritage had come to get her. The forest was silent, a heavy silence, almost supernatural. Only the rustling of the leaves in the night wind dared to disturb this oppressive quietude. But Judith knew, something was going to happen. The moon, round and bright, dominated the sky. It seemed to be watching her, judging her. A strange heat ran through her body, like a shiver burning under her skin. Her breath became short, her fingers trembled. It was starting again. Judith clung to the trunk of a tree, seeking support. But the pain pierced her from the inside. Her bones twisted, her flesh burned, her mind wavered. She could fight no more. Then came silence, a terrible silence. She raised her head. Her eyes, once full of humanity, now shone with a bestial glow. Her breathing was hoarse. Her body was no longer hers. The monster had awakened. A howl tore through the night. In the darkness, a figure moved. A scent. Prey. Without thinking, Judith, or whatever she had become, launched. Her legs were quicker, her senses sharper, her instincts hungry. She had to hunt. The sleeping village was a few miles away. The scent of blood called to her. A cottage, a flickering light through a window. Inside, a sleeping family, unaware of the danger. Judith approached. Her claws scraped the wood of the door. Then she stopped. A voice echoed in her mind. Mom. Her heart, if she still had one, tightened. A split second of lucidity. An inner struggle. She backed away, groaned, struggled. Then, as if the night itself were swallowing her, Judith disappeared into the darkness. Dawn would find her naked, trembling, covered in dirt and shadows. But alive, this time. Final chapter. The shadow of the past. Judith's last sacrifice. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of lost souls. Judith stood at the top of the hill, staring up at the black sky, where the moon was fading as dawn approached. Her heart was pounding, no longer from fear, but from an implacable certainty. She knew what she had to do. Behind her, the village still slept, oblivious to the drama that was unfolding. But Judith had no choice. If she didn't end the curse, it would destroy everything. The elder's voice still echoed in her mind. The blood of an innocent has awakened the beast. Only the blood of the one who bears the curse can appease it. She had long fled her fate, hoping for another solution. But there was none. One last sacrifice was needed. She took a deep breath, raised the ancient dagger she had found in the ruins of the temple. Her reflection in the blade no longer showed the young woman she once was. Only the shadow of the monster remained. A noise behind her. She turned and saw Louis. He had followed her. His eyes were full of tears, anger, but most of all love. Don't do this, Judith. She smiled sadly. There is no other way. The first ray of sunlight brushed the horizon. A scream rose in her chest, tearing the silence of dawn. Then, a last breath. The dagger fell to the ground, covered in blood. And with it, the curse. A light wind swept across the hill. The monster no longer existed. Only a legend remained. The end. Thank you for following this story until the end. If you liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. See you soon for a new terrifying story.